After the Labor Department released a worse than expected inflation report today, President Biden reacted with this statement, which reads in part, "Inflation hurts Americans' pocketbooks, and reversing this trend is a top priority for me. Going forward, it is important that Congress pass my Build Back Better plan, which is fully paid for and does not add to the debt. And 17 Nobel Prize winners in economics have said that my plan will ease inflationary pressures." But there are now new worries that the spike in inflation could cause Democrats to scale back. A key holdout in Build Back Better, Joe Manchin, has said for months that inflation is one of the main concerns that he has about the social spending package. And he tweeted this today: "By all accounts, the threat posed by record inflation to the American people is not transitory and is instead getting worse. From the grocery store to the gas pump, Americans know the inflation tax is real, and D.C. can no longer ignore the economic pain Americans feel every day." But doesn't today's inflation report show precisely why Americans need a social spending package? A rise in consumer prices doesn't mean Americans suddenly don't need help. It actually means that they need more help. But will Democrats cave and scale back, or will they hold their ground? Joining me now to discuss is President of Repairers of the Breach and co-chair of the Poor People's Campaign, Bishop William Barber. So, Bishop Barber, you can already see where this thing is going. Manchin has already hooked his fangs into this inflationary number and using it as a way to put the brakes on the Build Back Better bill. CBO, the moderates already demanded that the CBO score it before they vote on it. CBO said they don't know when they can provide a new scoring for it, so it pushes it off at least for weeks. How do you feel that this is going to move forward with this new inflationary pressure on that bill?
Well, when it comes to Manchin, notice he never has any economists with him. He just makes it up as he goes. So he's a constant liar. He'll find anything to say because he doesn't want to do it, because what he ultimately is doing is protecting the billionaires. That's all that he really cares about. And we gave him that infrastructure. I still believe Democrats should not have caved on that infrastructure. We should have held it until you got serious action on Build Back Better. But they had one election in Virginia, didn't look at the real causes why they didn't win, and that's because they didn't reach the sleeping giant, which are poor and low-wealth people, and they just get scared. But I'm starting to wonder not just about Manchin, but about our own. When I heard a minute ago, and I wasn't going to say anything, but I have to, my brother Clyburn answers show a lot of the problem of Washington. It's bad history. I heard him tell you, he said the problem should never have been what do moderates have to give up, progressives have to give up. As he said, what do poor and low wealth people have to give up? 60.9% of black people. That ought to be the focus of the Black Caucus. 60.9% of your people are poor and low wealth. The problem is, my brother, is the focus is on what billionaires. If we really cared for the people, as the way we care for the war economy, you know, we spent $21 trillion on the war economy and militarization of borders since 9/11, and it is shameful. Manchin is one thing, but it is shameful for Clyburn, who comes from the corridor of shame in South Carolina, to call for gradualism and to suggest that's a good thing, and then to say that's the way we got the 64 Civil Rights Act, 65 Voting Rights Act. No, the way we got those things, people had to die. That's how that. So are we saying now, are even black Congress people saying that more people have to die in order for us to finally do what ought to be done right? Which we should first look at, how much is it costing us not to do this? 50 million people got sick from COVID. 760,000 died. 89 million Americans lost their job. If we do Build Back Better, the expanded child tax credit will lift 35 million households. Earned income tax credit, 17 million low-wage workers. If we do the pre-K, universal pre-K that they're already limiting, but it would be 6 million children. If we close the Medicaid coverage gap, that's 4 million families. What is wrong with this conversation that it's about what moderates got to give up, rather than what the people are having to give up because Washington is broken and being led by the billionaires?
Right. Bishop Barber, you've also argued for some time now that this is why we need a living wage that keeps pace with inflation. And that right now, with the pace of inflation, would be like $20 an hour, and not just $15 an hour, which is now the catchphrase. Do you see Democrats at all moving in that direction with this report under their belt, or do you think that they will run in the other direction and try to, kind of some sort of austerity program around wages?
I'm so frustrated. I don't even know if they're running or just falling the hell out and not doing anything. I mean, I'm just being real. When I heard this language I heard on your show tonight, look, billionaires made $2.1 trillion over 19 months during COVID. We had a chance to pass $15 in the union with the second COVID relief bill. And the Black Caucus should have said, wait a minute, you're going to do this. Because if you do this, 40% of Black people would have been lifted out of poverty and low wages, 40%. You're right. We need a living wage that is increased with inflation. If we did that, just with 15, it ought to be 20, but just with 15, that would pump $330 billion into the economy and lift 32 million people. It bothers me to the high heavens and other poor people and religiously poor law that the conversation is, well, what do the moderate have to give up? What do the liberals have to give up? What are the people having to give up? And by the way, if we don't do this Build Back Better plan, it's going to hurt home health care workers. In the plan is some money to pay home health care workers at least $15 an hour. You know 28% of home health care workers are Black and 23% of them are Latino. The people that care for our family members in homes, that's who we ought to be talking about. That's all the numbers we ought to be talking about. That's what the press conferences ought to be about. That's where Biden ought to be going. That's where the caucus ought to be going. You could put Manchin and others in his place, but you're going to have to do it with the people. And surely, Charles, we need a living wage. We have not raised the minimum wage for 12 years. And Dr. King asked for a $2 minimum wage in 1963 at the March on Washington, which would be $15 today if it had kept pace with inflation. Right.
So you bring up a very important point, Mr. Barber, which is, no, don't worry about it. You bring up a very important point, which is the differentials in race and gender. So the infrastructure plan got through, but those jobs are primarily men-dominated industries. And right now, if you look at across those industries, both from construction and, a broadband or whatever, those are not areas where Black people are over-indexed. Where Black people will get the help is in the Build Back Better bill, if it ever sees the light of day. What do you think, what do you think about this idea? If they push the one through that's really not going to be primarily for us in terms of that 11 million jobs or whatever they say it's going to create, but the one that is going to help Black people most is the one that's stuck in the mud.
Right, and the people that did the most voting to get you office, that's the one that you're sabotaging or not pushing for. Let me go back quick to the infrastructure, though. 550 billion of that one is new spending. It's not the 1 point whatever is not total new spending. And much of like with the pipes, for instance, it's about 60% less than what's needed. And none of that money, when it goes to these states led by Republicans who are trying to roll back voting rights and doing race voter suppression, those state leaders get to choose where that money goes. But where do you think it's going to go? Primarily to their friends. As you said, it's mostly men and mostly white women. White people, white men. On the other hand, you have the Build Back Better plan that people actually need. The bill that's going to help Black folk and Latino folk and poor white folk is stalling. The bill that's going to help more billionaires and going to be directed in communities that are not necessarily poor and low wealth communities is the bill that gets through and gets passed. Now, Manchin told us this was going to happen. When he used that racist word, entitlement, that word was developed during the Southern strategy. And when people use it in the South, it means Black. It doesn't sound Black, but that's what it means, entitlement program. And the problem is, another part of the Democrats, they did not early on say, if you're going to be against this, we're going to disaggregate these numbers and show if you're against earned income tax credit, if you're against child tax credit, if you're against raising money for healthcare workers, so forth and so on, then you are engaging in policy racism and policy classism because of the numbers disaggregated tell you who's going to be hurt the most if this doesn't happen.
Bishop Barber, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Animated tonight as usual. I like it. Thank you so much for joining.